Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Jai Shri Shivara Madhava ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivedanta ki Jai, Danitai Gaura Premalende. All glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious lotus feet of Shri Shri Guranga Ranga, all glorious Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 14, Text 19, The Forest of Enjoyment. We'll read word for word. Kvachitcha, and sometimes. Dusahena, unbearable. Kaya abhyanantara, vanina, because of the fire of hunger and thirst within the body. Grihita saraha, whose patience is exhausted. Svakutumbaya, unto his own family members. Kudyati, he becomes angry. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Sometimes, due to bodily hunger and thirst, the conditioned soul becomes so disturbed that he loses his patience and becomes angry with his own beloved sons, daughters, and wife. Thus, being unkind to them, he suffers all the more. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Vidyapati Thakur has sung, Tatala Saikate Vari Bindu Sama Sutamita Ramani Samage. The happiness of family life is compared to a drop of water in the desert. No one can be happy in family life. According to the Vedic civilization, one cannot give up the responsibilities of family life, but today everyone is giving up family life by divorce. This is due to the miserable condition experienced in the family. Sometimes, due to misery, one becomes very hardened towards his affectionate sons, daughters, and wife. This is but part of the blazing fire of the forest of material life. Om Gyanatimurandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshramanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swarupa Kadamayam Darajasa Parantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langaite Girimya Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, chapter 14, the forest of enjoyment. Sometimes due to bodily hunger and thirst, the conditioned soul becomes so disturbed that he loses his patience and becomes angry with his own beloved sons, daughters, and wife. Thus, being unkind to them, he suffers all the more. So this sounds very unnecessary at times. Just because one's hunger pangs are not satisfied, one exhibits anger and resentment even towards those that he loves. Right at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, when the great sages had assembled and they started asking questions, there's a wonderful verse that is given. Prayana Payusha Sabya Kalavasminyige Jana Mandam Sumandam Matayo Manda Bhagyaha Upadrutaha. That, O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men have but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. If someone steps on your toe the wrong way, someone looks at you the wrong way, you become disturbed, they become disturbed. You cut someone off in traffic, they're very disturbed. Right? A lot of anger arises. And although this translation is only mentioning bodily hunger and thirst, we can understand that this is so for all the senses. So when our senses, knowledge-acquiring senses, our working senses are not being nourished, or they're not in a state of balance, we become disturbed. When our tongue, when our belly, when our genitals are not satisfied, we become disturbed and we exhibit anger towards those that are near and dear to us. So in the Sri Upadeshamrita, Srila Prabhupada is explaining very simply what it is very, very important that the yogi learns how to control their senses, in particular the tongue. Right? So from the tongue, not only are we speaking, but we're also partaking. So we're eating certain foodstuffs that may agitate the mind. So we're using words to repeat what you're hearing, and words sometimes can be used in a very harsh demeanor, or they can be used to elevate one's consciousness. So being able to control the tongue is of importance to any yogi who is striving for self-realization, even when it comes to eating certain foods. So vacho vegam manasa kroda vegam jiva vegam udorapasta vegam etan vegan yo visaheta dira savam apimam pitivim sasisyat. That a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger and the urges of the tongue, the belly, and the genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So it sounds like a very, very simple concept that, just tolerate your speaking, your urge to use your tongue, your belly, and the genitals. Yeah, I can do that for a week. I can do a detox or a cleanse for a week. Right? But this is a systematic approach. This is long term, not just for 1 week, like how sometimes people do a liver cleanse or a bowel cleanse or they go to a weekend Vipassana meditation just for one weekend. You're silent, you get your certificate, cheese, and you've done your Vipassana or whatever. But this is not just for show, this is ongoing and long-term for those who are actually on the path of perfection. Being able to tolerate the urge to speak. Everyone these days, wants to speak, right? The internet has created or has given birth to so many Vedantists, to so many self-taught gurus or self-developed incarnations. We can see all these things on the internet that people they want to speak. They've learned something, they've seen something, they're going to speak about it and tell people how to behave, X, Y, Z, whatever it is, whether it's someone who wants to be known as a philosopher, whether it's someone who wants to be an activist, politicians, they're famous for always speaking. Right, but sometimes it's like a puri. It's just puffed up hot air and then it just comes out, right? So sometimes that is what's happening. Everyone has this urge to speak. We're constantly consuming information from the educational institutions. Whether or not that is useful information, that depends on what you speak. We're consuming so much and we want to share it with the world. But for a yogi, we're very particular on what we want to hear and what we want to repeat, because that influences our behavior and that influences those that are around us. So whether it is in the Upadeshamrita and the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, Krishna also explains why it is important for a yogi to engage all his senses in Krishna conscious activities, in activities that will not only purify the senses but elevate our consciousness, take us from a material degraded consciousness to Krishna consciousness. The mind is very demanding. We know of the different parts of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Srila Prabhupada uses metaphors, he uses analogies, Srila Prabhupada uses similes sometimes to try to make a point, because sometimes we're very forgetful if it's just spoken simply or purely. So Prabhupada uses different examples. As we see here, the material world oftentimes is compared to different things. Here it is a blazing fire, the forest of material life. There's a blazing fire. What else in the Bhagavatam? How else does Prabhupada explain the material world in the Bhagavatam when he uses different elements? Who can remember? The blazing fire. Toilet. In which section? I'm trying to remember. It was a lecture. Okay. The toilet. Do your business and go. I remember that. Do your business and go out. It's not, you don't hang around in the toilet and make it nice, put a newspaper here, nice mat, pictures around. You do your business and go. Right, sometimes it is, it's a forest fire or it's a deep, dark well. Danger at every step. Happiness and distress. So a lot of the times the picture is not pretty. Material nature, in the 37 short years of my life, I've seen that, this world is not fair. It's not created to be fair. It's the material world. It's a place where you come and you're accruing karma, or you're burning off your karma, you're engaging in spiritual activity, and you leave. No one here stays forever, not even the trees. Right? So the material world is a place, it's a pit stop. You come. You know how in Formula 1, sometimes they have it next to our temple, right, Albert Park? It sounds, sounds like a swarm of bees. But anyway, Formula 1, I used to watch it when I was growing up. I have 3 brothers, so I watched that, rugby, the works. So Formula One, you have your Michael Schumacher when he used to drive, or Damon Hill, riding around the track, and then they get to a pit stop. And a pit stop is a place where they go and park very quickly, 10 seconds. You don't waste time. Change the wheels, put some fuel, do whatever you need to do so that that body, that Formula One car, that engine is fine for you to do another 3 to 5 laps. And you're out. So that is the material world. You're in and you're out. Come and get what you need to get from here if you want to make an exit. Right? Ambarish Maharaj showed us how to engage our entire body in Krishna consciousness. Using our body in the service of the Lord, all our senses can be engaged in the processes of bhakti. Right now we've brought our bodies, hopefully our minds are here as well. Right? We're smelling the incense, we're seeing the deity, we're chanting the Lord's name. So we're using our senses in Krishna's service, and these senses are being purified. But when we forget Krishna, the same senses get covered over by material nature, by lower consciousness. So the more we hear the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, like the sages at the beginning are also stating that when we hear regularly over and over again, our original spiritual consciousness is awakened. So we do not start feeling like this material world is a place where we can come and get comfortable. No one can be comfortable in the material world. It is a very uncomfortable place because, as we mentioned this verse from the Bhagavatam, there's so many things that go on. Our minds are always disturbed. We are constantly bombarded and harassed by our own senses. The sense objects are embedding themselves in the senses. The senses are being pulled everywhere by these sense objects. So it is very, very difficult to tame the mind without proper spiritual knowledge or without a proper spiritual culture. So these analogies that Prabhupada uses to explain material nature, to explain the senses, it's not just for fun. Oh yeah, there's an animal here, there's the ocean there, there's the raging wind, there's the forest fire. We get the imagery. The imagery is really not the point. Let's understand what happens in a forest fire. We have them here in Australia. It ravages, it is very quick, it destroys. Who wants to live there? Even the animals flee. Right, a deep dark well, it is covered, you see grass, it's misleading. There's a deep hole, you sink in it, no one can see you, no one can hear you. Who would like to live there? Who would like to make that the permanent place of residence? Any takers? Deep dark well? No light, no sun, no food, you're just deep down there, no one can hear, no? Anybody? It's a well, it's just you by yourself. Blazing forest fire. It's excruciating heat. You might get burnt, but hey, it's a blazing fire. Any takers? No, it's not, it does not sound good. No one wants to be there. So Prabhupada uses these strong examples to show us that this material existence is like that actually. It burns us every single time. You think you're coming up for a breath. It's like a drowning man who gets happy when he comes up for a breath. You're still drowning. It's not a good situation. These are meant to remind us because I don't know if you've noticed that we forget very quickly. We easily forget stuff. So these are mentioned regularly to remind us, don't get comfortable, don't get comfortable. Keep striving, just keep going. Because the more complacent you get, the more difficult it is for you to strive to become Krishna conscious. Because you're thinking, my body is great, I have a nice car, I live in Albert Park or Malvern or Brighton, I'm in first world, no one's wearing a mask, we're doing good corona-wise, it's all good, why do I need Krishna? Everything is working smoothly, like clockwork, well-oiled machine. But when we open the pages, we're reminded, well then how's your body? You're aging, you're forgetful, you're experiencing stress in the workplace, there's money issues, there's family issues. Then we are reminded, oh yeah, it's not that great. These things are not mentioned to depress us. We shouldn't walk out of here thinking, oh my God, it's over. Might as well go jump in the ocean. It is to remind us, let's do our business of becoming Krishna conscious and leave. Let's not try to be comfortable in a place that does not even guarantee that you will be comfortable. Material nature does not guarantee it is going to behave nicely towards you. Miserable weather, snakes, spiders bite you. There's no guarantee that's going to be comfortable. Why take that huge risk of having to come back again, take birth in a womb, and have to live this out again and again and again and again? So these points are being repeated. The example of the tortoise is given in the Bhagavad Gita, actually, where Prabhupada is explaining how the tortoise is there. It's very slow in general. So the tortoise does what it needs to do with its senses, and once it's done, the senses shut down. And so we do what we need to do with our senses, and once we're finished doing that, we retract the senses. We do not engage the senses in unnecessary activity. We want the senses to be purified. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the test of a yogi or a devotee or a self-realized soul is that he's able to control the senses according to his plan. Most people, however, this is very, very difficult. People want to act very loosely and without restriction. Freedom. Liberated woman, liberated man. I can do what I like. I'm going to have a hot summer. I'm going to express myself, no rules, don't judge me, hear me roar. These things are there. Acting loosely is seen as a sign of great achievement. The looser you are these days, the more support and the more attention you get. So now society starts rewarding bad behavior. We see it all around us. Dressing scantily or engaging in really not so sattva gun activities, if you know what I mean. These behaviors are rewarded, and we see it all. You know, you plaster your stuff online. Yeah, great weekend, go wasted, raw. You know, the whole thing. Right? I've done it, you know, I'm saying this out of experience. When I was in, you know, teenagehood, luckily social media wasn't what it is otherwise. You know, embarrassing situations. The more we post these, they're like, yeah, I was so wasted. There's a picture of you drinking something, and then you're half asleep, and then it's just a mess. But this type of behavior is being tolerated, and it is being encouraged. Yes, do it. Be free. Show yourself as a carefree person. You give zero, you know what, you don't care. People are not judging you. You yourself, yeah. And people are like, yes, she's the one. Yes, she's such an amazing person. Yes. But when a devotee looks at this, or when a sober person looks at it, we understand you have no sense control. You are going to crash and burn. By the time you're 16, 17, you've done everything. And sometimes when people come to Krishna consciousness, we can see that they are materially exhausted. They have chewed the chewed. Once again, Prabhupada is using it. I've tried it once. I was chewing an apple over and over again. Then I'd take it out, come back later, and I'd chew it and I'd chew it. And I'm at some point, it's like, what is the point? My jaw hurts. There's no satisfaction coming from this anymore. Why am I doing this? And then I think Prabhupada always says, in the material world, we try to squeeze some enjoyment, and it's like chewing that which has already been chewed. We're trying to get enjoyment from something that will not, categorically, it will not give us any pleasure. And hence, at one of the last, what does Prabhupada say? Prabhupada says, no one can be happy in family life. No one. Right. A devotee is seen as when these senses are being compared, in the example of, the tortoise subduing its senses, the same verse 258, Prabhupada explains that the senses are like serpents. Serpents move very swiftly. Like you see it over there, next thing it's here. Right, it goes on it, whatever, it wiggles through the sand, the rattlesnake is gone. Before you know it, you're like, it's right in front of you. The senses are very swift, right? As soon as they catch something, they're gone. As soon as the senses see the sense objects, it's already there. So a devotee is explained to be like a snake charmer. Right? When we were growing up, I used to watch on TV, these people who play the different mantras or melodies on the fruit, then the snake comes and the snake behaves and the snake becomes subdued and it listens to the master and the flute playing. The devotees are like snake charmers, right? We never allow the snake, the senses, to just do whatever they like because we will be exhausted. The nature of this material world is that material desires, which is what these senses and the sense objects are trying to drive us to, material desires can never be satisfied. It's like just you keep pouring ghee on a fire. They just keep burning. No matter how much you satisfy, you just keep wanting more and more. And because matter cannot satisfy the non-material self, we keep going back and trying to enjoy and chew what has been chewed. It is impossible. So when we sober up, when we gain mastery of our senses, we're able to control our senses and redirect the pleasure of the senses to the source of all pleasure, Sri Krishna. And by engaging our senses in that way, then our senses do not lead us to anger and frustration, even for something so simple as not having a meal or whatever the sense may be. We are able to control our tongue. We're able to control the urges of the belly by eating specific Krishna prasadam. We're able to control the genitals by practicing celibacy and only procreation. Right? This entire chapter where we are hearing this conversation, Sukadeva Goswami speaking to Maharaj Parikshit or Jad Bharat or King Rahugana, wherever it is in the Bhagavatam, we get a clear understanding that the senses must be used for a higher purpose, otherwise the senses will drag us down to material consciousness and material existence. In this verse in particular, Prabhupada in the purport speaks about the happiness of family life as being compared to a drop of water in the desert. That's self-explanatory. We know that conditions of a desert is real, water is real, right? Where in the material world, there's different ashrams that are bona fide, and we enter into those ashrams in a God-centered way. We're not chasing material pleasure. What we're chasing is service to Krishna within that union. So we may be reading these not harsh, but these blatantly true purpose from Srila Prabhupada, where he's explaining what family life is when the senses are out of control versus what it is when the two people involved are trying to tap into their highest nature, are trying to tap into their spiritual identity. In that way, they use their family life to elevate. They go to work to give Krishna consciousness. They maintain their Krishna conscious families. But it would be very dishonest to say that this statement is not true. It is like a drop of water in the desert, because material family life means you go out there, you're fighting with the material energy, you're fighting with your own mind and the minds of others around you. Then you go back home, there's more fighting there sometimes. The kids are pulling, they want this, the wife wants this, or the husband wants that. It's exhausting. You snap. You can't control your senses because your mind is being bombarded by material needs and wants. Your senses are being attacked for material needs and wants. And these days, it's not just with the man, the woman as well, because she goes out to work as well. Dealing with the material energy is quite exhausting. Right? Even for devotees, sometimes when you come back, the first thing you just want to hear, or when you get in the car on your way home, you just want to get a spiritual bath. You just want to hear the holy name. You just want to listen to a class, to just wash away all that energy that you've been exposed to because you're out there maintaining yourself. That's the reality. I know this is my personal realization, having worked for a few years. At some point, you just want to get out, get in the car, just play kirtan. That's all you want to do. You have your prasadam with you in the workplace, you do what you gotta do, and you get out. Right? We go there to get what we need to get so we can maintain our Krishna consciousness. So we learn to control the urges of the body by engaging our mind and our senses in Krishna's service. And by doing that, not only are we able to steer away from the misery caused by material existence and just being in this material world, we're able to elevate our consciousness and rise against the turbulent mind. So I will stop here for now, and I'll ask if there's any comments or questions. Yes.
The comment, I was thinking that if the material world is not described so drastically, then how will we become detached from it? So that's another reason why we have this section.
Yeah, we have many sections that explain the reality. Because what happens is we, as I mentioned, we become complacent and comfortable in a place where we're not meant to be. So we need constant reminders because our memory is not so good. We need to be constantly reminded. And when you're on a battlefield, you need to know what you're going up against. Right? If we think of the imagery of the Bhagavad Gita, when the battle is about to begin and Krishna is asked by Arjuna to drive his chariot in between the armies so he can see what's going on. He wants to see, who am I up against? What sort of conditions are we in? What's the competition? So he drives up and Arjuna is able to see everything. So we're in the material world, we need to understand what we're up against. We need to understand how these bodies function, what the limitations of the body are, what the constraints are, the positive ways we can use the material body. We need to understand the material energy, how it affects us, how it affects those that are around us, and how not to get affected by all these lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion, madness, prajalpa, the whole spiel. How to deal with Maya, the external energy. We need to be educated on that so that we can become successful. These pointers are not given so that we give up and just say, oh well, I'll never be able to deal with this, so I might as well just forget about it. No, it's meant for us to know what to avoid, how to avoid it, what processes to follow. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. Right? It's given there what books to read, where to go, who to associate with. So all these things are given so that we can become successful. Yes, Sylvia. I wish that at this age I was asking such questions. Sylvia, how old are you? 9. So Sylvia, 9 years old, she's asked, I'm repeating the question. She's saying that when we're in class, we hear the facts of the material world, and we leave class, we forget. So what can we do to make sure that we're not in a state of forgetfulness when we leave the class? Like the sages always say that we should hear Bhagavatam regularly. I'll repeat what His Holiness Devamrita Swami said, that when you're at home as well, you read Śrīmad Bhāgavatam regularly, or you listen, or you read your books, or with your parents, and if you hear it every day, you will remember. The more you hear about what the material world is like, the more you hear about who you are as a servant of Krishna, chances are you'll remember that more. Right? In the beginning, even just the 16 names, the Hare Krishna mantra, it took me 2 to 3 days to memorize the mantra. So I had to practice every day. Hare Krishna, Krishna. I had to practice. Learning I still have my shloka book. When we're in the ashram, we're learning shlokas. So every day repeating the same thing. And then you don't forget. So if you do it over and over again, if we listen to the Bhagavatam regularly, then we won't forget. So that is a trick. We listen regularly, and we also ask our parents to help us as well. And then we won't forget. Happy? Yeah, Prakriti. The question is, how do we implement what we read from the Bhagavatam, which is one of the guidelines when you're learning Bhakti Shastri, practical application. Whatever you read, we're supposed to put it into action. So the Bhagavatam speaks a lot about how the nature of the conditioned soul, me and you, right? We're forgetful, we make mistakes, we get illusioned. Do you make mistakes sometimes at school? Yeah, and you mistake something, or we don't give the right answer, we don't have a good memory. So Bhagavatam is, whenever that happens, just remember that Bhagavatam said it first. Right? When you're outside, when you see people not feeling happy or difficulties, the Bhagavatam is telling us that happiness in this world will come and it will go. Just like in the morning the sun is going to rise, it's going to set. Now we're getting to winter season, summer season will come. So during the times of the day, we see the sun, we see the seasons changing. We remember this, Bhagavatam is explaining this. So whatever we see out there, we try to remember what does Bhagavatam say about it. The material world is not a nice place. There's danger at every step, right? There's accidents happening, there's natural disasters. Sometimes when I'm driving, I see trucks of animals being driven somewhere. Or when you go to the supermarket, you see some different species of life. And we understand what Krishna wants us to eat. And we look at the other species and we're thinking these species are not meant to be killed. Right? Then we understand Bhagavatam is teaching us that. So when we get older, when we talk with our friends, we can share all these things that we read and say, you know, I eat vegetarian foods because I do not want to harm the environment and contribute to, you know, these animals that we need to take care of. So slowly from what you eat to where you go to school, who you see, how you play, you can teach them small things like that. Okay? No problem. Yes, Mahatma Prabhu.
You are telling the children, read Bhagavatam, read verses.
I'm telling everyone.
Yeah.
It's a universal response.
How the answer.
How the what?
In the examination,
Uh-huh.
certain questions are asked. How would they answer if they are just reading Bhagavatam?
What exam?
Say, your
School exams.
examination or
Okay.
you are in medical school,
Uh-huh.
they ask you Parkinsonism. How does it happen? How does it affect the human being? How it results? So if you don't know that, how do you pass the principle?
When you're in
You
school.
have to do both sides.
Okay.
You have to tell them, read both.
Okay, for the 9-year-olds and for everyone listening, when you're in a workplace or when you're at school, the question was in particular, how do I remember what we get from Bhagavatam when I'm outside? That was the question. What you're mentioning is that when you're already in school, you have your tests and everything, you have to study for school. That's a fact of life. I studied political science. So I had to study certain books. I studied editorial stuff. So I had to study certain books for my education. That's something separate. We need to do that. I studied for my driving test. We need to do that. Because how we situate ourselves, we will use that to maintain our Krishna conscious lifestyle. We go to work to give. Right? If you're a doctor, engineer, I was going to be a politician. Anyway, you do all these things to maintain yourself so that you can have a Krishna conscious lifestyle. You can pay to visit the holy dham, to go to a retreat. You can support the temple. You can support the brahmacharis, the brahmacharinis. You can support different projects. And that is how your income becomes purified, and that you're offering your hard-earned work to Krishna. And that's how it gets purified. We all don't need to go running to the mountains or rushing to the ashrams. Wherever we are situated, we can engage in bhakti. Go through school, go through work, do what we have to do, but we can always remember Krishna and offer our fruits to Krishna. Because that all belongs to Krishna anyway. So we do what we have to do. We play our part, but we never forget Krishna. Okay, one last question before we depart. No, all done. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Bol.